It's been called Walkout Wednesday. 500,000 workers walking off the job, the biggest disruption indeed in more than a decade. Well, the coordinated action between unions means that teachers, train drivers, civil servants, bus drivers and university staff all have walked out with rallies now by unions to protest at the government's plans to try and enforce the minimum service and safety levels during strikes. Of course, that legislation going through Parliament. Let's get the latest now with our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, joining us from a rally in Birmingham. And, Jack, we can see behind you a significant number of people. Part of the problem, of course, for the children and the mums and dads, they didn't quite know how many teachers would actually be walking out, and therefore the head teachers didn't know whether to keep the schools open or to close them.
Well, that was exactly the situation this morning, Mark. As you can see, there are thousands of people behind me that have attended this rally here in Birmingham. There's members here from the NEU, the PCS and also the UCU as well. Of course, Birmingham being one of the youngest cities in the UK, the youngest city in the UK. There are a lot of people of university age, of school age as well. This morning, I was outside a school in Edgbaston, and essentially that school, they had 2 classes for every year group, and one of the classes for each year group just was told to stay at home because they didn't have the staff, they didn't have the teachers to be able to provide the children the education today safely. And so for some parents that had 2 children, both in the same year but one in different classes, one got to stay at home and do work from there, the other was told to go into a shifted timetable. But you're right, because of the fact that teachers didn't have to say to their schools whether they would be striking or not, a lot of schools had to wait until this morning to determine whether they could open and provide the care for the children today. But from speaking to teachers here, a lot of them, the decision to strike was a real tough one, and even though they are committed to continue striking until they can, they believe they want more funding for their schools. They want better, of course, working conditions. It's not just about the pay. A lot of them saying that they find it more and more difficult to do their job because of the lack of funding from the government. But the government say they've allocated an extra £2 billion in order for school funding. But one teacher said £2 billion, when you spread it across all of the schools, he doesn't know how much of that would actually make it to his.
And this is a common theme or a common thread, of course, from the health unions to the teachers and elsewhere. It's not just about the pay, it's the conditions they're having to work under. And I think the NEU, the union concerned, saying, they've been trying to speak to education secretaries, about 2 or 3 of them, of course, in post, since about 2 years ago.
That's exactly right. Of course, we know that some of from teachers on social media particularly, the 3 things that keep getting mentioned are the underfunding of schools. A lot of teachers saying that they have to buy their own glue sticks, have to buy their own pens, things for their children, resources for their children to use in lessons that should be provided by the school and the funding that government gives them. Another one, of course, is the squeeze on school day and the hours. That a lot of them pointing to the fact that they have to do lesson timetabling and things in their holiday time, and they're saying, what other job do you have to do that kind of work during your holiday? And of course, that workload, which some teachers say is one of the highest in the world. We know there's around just over 100,000, nearly 200,000 teachers on strike today. The NEU saying 40,000 people in the last fortnight have joined their union. So it's showing that there are growing support amongst the teaching profession for these strikes and for this industrial action, as you can see from the crowd behind me.
Yeah, and they're getting pretty vocal, of course, and we reflect this is a rally rather than a picket of a school or anything of that nature. Do we know what they'll be doing later in the day? Is there going to be a march planned in Birmingham, for instance?
So the plan is, we started a little bit late, but the plan is that once they've had some more speakers on the stage, the plan is to march through the city centre and do a loop to come back to where we are, to like I say, show that mass support through the streets of Birmingham. But people have been gathering here to hear from speakers from the NEUs, from the UCU, parents as well, all in fine voice and very vocal about their support for this industrial action.